Lonesome Lands podcast. I'm here on this one with the Maude family, who has had to wait a year to talk, and I've had to wait a long time to ask them stuff. But they're finally here. But first, we have an opportunity for cattle producers from the farm, which is a platform fighting for folks like us. It was started by A.J. Richards, a homesteader whose family, the Bundys, yes, those Bundys, have been homesteading since 1916, even taking on the feds to protect their rights. AJ saw how corporate greed takes 70% of your revenue, so From the Farm set out to help producers keep 100% of their retail dollar. So if you're a cattle producer, this is the opportunity for you. They started with 15% commission, but knew that wasn't good enough. After a year of being live, they've changed some things and found a solution, offering a free base membership with features other platforms charge hundreds for, without bringing more customers. 80 producers are on board, serving hundreds nationwide. Set up your store to sell directly from your farm at fromthefarm.org and keep your hard-earned money and help us preserve our American heritage and food sovereignty. So AJ Richard is selling put that together to help cattle producers sell their and pork and everything they sell on there, but directly. And then if you go on there, I just checked, they sell beef tallow, all that kind of stuff. So they're helping us do kind of what we're doing here. So Heather and Charles, you guys sell direct, don't you?
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you
beef and
ship?
no, we don't.
Yeah.
We've been
You
asked that
just
a lot.
right.
Um,
Just well,
yeah,
now that you're famous, you got to call AJ up and become part of From the Farm.
yeah,
But you're at
We
the farmers
struggle to
market,
keep
so
up. We
yeah,
struggle to keep up, is why we don't ship. And
right.
right here at home.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's good to hear. So, if you're not familiar with the Maude story, they were indicted for stealing federal property, really, I guess, to get down to it. And then those charges were dismissed by the Agriculture Secretary just a couple weeks ago at a big press conference in Washington, D.C. So, I guess to get into it, Charles, this is your family's property, right?
yep.
Since the year I keep hearing 1906, is that?
Well, we came to the area in 1906, 7, somewhere in that neighborhood. But this land that we own was purchased by my great great grandpa and grandma in 1910.
Okay.
And then my great grandpa homesteaded additional lands through his lifetime and added to it. And he lost some of that in the 30s, which is part of our Forest Service permit that we run on today.
Hmm. So he lost land and it's now federal land.
Yep,
yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
They went when all the people were starting to lose lands or couldn't pay taxes and whatnot. The federal government came through, paid their taxes for them, took the land, and then that's kind of what started the whole Buffalo Gap National Grasslands in this particular area. Is all those pieces and parts of land that were never claimed or were lost to taxes in the 30s. They all grouped them all up in the 40s and the 50s and turned them into the Buffalo Gap National Grassland.
Hmm. And is all of, I guess I was planning on getting into this later, but that all of that national grassland is that leased to ranchers?
Yes.
So the whole
Yep.
thing is
Yep.
is under grazing permits.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. That's
Even the
interesting.
wilderness area is still
Okay.
the proposed wilderness area. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get into that, but your family first came there to homestead in that
Well,
area.
we my had been some of my great grandpa's aunts came to Homestead, and that's what drew him out here from eastern South Dakota, um and then he liked it here, so he came. Well, my great great grandpa came because his sisters were in this area and bought a piece of land from somebody that had homesteaded, and that's the piece of land that we now own from 1910. But then my great grandpa came out and decided to do some homesteading and some claiming and stuff of his own. And it just happened to be there was available parts land around what my great grandpa had already purchased.
Yeah. I love this kind of stuff. Talking about the history of everything and going back. And if you're not familiar with the area, it's just west of the Badlands. And so I just like to think about like what people thought when they went out there, like especially like 1910. I suppose they kind of knew, but just to hit those Badlands and then to get across it and see that area, it's pretty
Yeah,
neat.
I somewhat wonder why they stopped where they did sometimes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I suppose you do. Probably now, right? It hadn't rained for a
Yeah,
while.
right. Yeah. We've inherited a problem.
Yeah. So I'm in Western Iowa. My great grandpa stopped here and bought land from the railroad. But then part of his family kept going out and are up around Ainsworth and Valentine area, and there's Mundorf's kind of all across Western Nebraska. And they're kind of come from that same family. But I thought, yeah, my grandpa was the smart one. He stopped before it quit raining, I guess. Um, but Heather, you're from Wyoming?
I am. Yep. Grew up on a cattle and sheep ranch in eastern Wyoming.
Okay, yeah. And so how'd you guys meet up?
We were set up on a blind date by a shirt tail relative of mine, and we met for the first time to have supper in Sturgis.
Oh,
And yeah, and went from there. Yeah.
hmm. Well, worked out.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
But I did talk. So during this whole thing, Kyle Edoff called me or emailed, and then we got to talking, and he said, "Yeah, I was Charles's only classmate."
Yep.
And
Yep.
and I thought I did not know there was one room schoolhouses still when you were a kid, but
Yep. There was Eastern Custer County had well, they had two of them, one in Fairburn and one in and what we called Spring Creek Elementary, which was in the old town of Folsom. And there was honestly in late 80s there was 320 acres that some developer bought right next or not too far from the school there, and there was little trailer houses set up and stuff like that. So we had there was like 26 kids went there at the high of my career there.
yeah, and
And
that
but
was like
Kyle and I was always just together all from the beginning. Yeah.
so you're saying 26 kids from that's kindergarten through what grade?
Eight.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You're acting like, boy, there was 26 kids in our elementary.
Well, I went to a two-room schoolhouse and there were about 12 K through 8.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I'm far enough east, I guess. My dad went to a one-room schoolhouse, but I think they got rid of it not long after he was done. So,
My
yeah.
youngest sister made it through there and then they closed it.
Hmm.
So it's no longer.
Yeah. Yeah, all right. So you've been ranching. So you guys got on a blind date, fell in love, got married, started ranching there in western South Dakota. And Heather, were writing for Tri-State. Did you go to school for writing or for journalism or something?
Yeah, and I have an animal science degree with production and communication options from the University of Wyoming. Started at Laramie County Community College on a livestock judging scholarship, which is a 2-year community college, and then
Oh,
got an associate's degree there, and then finished at the University of Wyoming.
no wonder your Shad likes you so much. Didn't he go there too?
He did, yeah,
Yeah.
he did. A little bit before I was there, I'd like to point out, Jim.
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, we we got married on July 6th of 2013, and 3 months later we went through the Atlas blizzard as newlyweds, which was pretty. We our summer pasture was the epicenter of that, but fortunately at that time Charles was renting his mom's family place in central South Dakota, so all of our running age cows were far enough east it just rained on them. But
Mm,
we started our marriage with the Atlas blizzard, so we different issue, but was not our first trial.
right. Yeah. And so for those not familiar, I guess you want to just describe that real quick.
It
Hard to
was
describe, I
oh,
guess.
it's the worst thing you'll probably ever see in your life. Thousands upon thousands of dead cows for miles upon miles, and and it just came at the wrong time of year. It was so wet. You couldn't get your breath during that blizzard. It was just, the snow was blue. When you would cut a snowbank with a tractor or whatever pushing snow, it was blue. It turned 70 degrees within, 3 days. That stuff was gone within a week. There was, within the next 6 weeks, it continued to rain after that too. We had like 11 inches of moisture, I think it was, within 6 weeks of that. And oh my gosh, it was a mess. You just had to do your best to keep stuff that was alive and deal with what you could of the aftermath. It was, when we loaded out calves to sell that fall, we were just all blessed that there was anything left, period.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
But it was 80 degrees the day before that blizzard.
Yeah.
And then it was a 3-day blizzard. And I think they estimate around 3 feet of snow. But obviously we had severe winds with it. So you'd have drifts that were in our yard. We had 20, 30-foot drifts just going down through the buildings and stuff. But yeah, we didn't have power for a week. Did a lot of news interviews then as well, because I was very active in the journalism world as a freelance journalist at that time. So I had a lot of major news outlets. So Charles and my dad rigged up a generator system so that we could sit and do this right here then as well, which was interesting.
I learned a lot about my in-laws at that point when we were backfeeding a generator into our house. I just never had been to that point yet. And wow, those people, they live a long ways out there in western Wyoming. There's some pretty creative stuff goes on.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah. And then 10 years later, you're dealt the next, you got media training, I guess, for your next issue. And so this next issue, I guess, to jump into it, you just were ranching on your place, and all of a sudden, I guess, how'd you find out about it or first hear about it?
So we first found out about this on March 29th of 2024 when U.S. Forest Service Special Agent Travis Lunders and Patrol Captain Jeff Summers showed up at our house unannounced. That was Good Friday. And they said they wondered if they could visit with us. So we invited them into our home, sat down at our kitchen table, and Lunders said, we had a hunter turn in a no trespassing sign on a section of fence between your private property and your allotment that is not on the line. And he filed a complaint on that. And then he said that while he was looking into that complaint, which it is worth noting, we still have not seen the complaint, or we have not had the name of the hunter released to us. We question his existence. But while there, he then went across our private property to the eastern side, where it's another boundary between ourselves and our U.S. Forest Service allotment. And he determined that fence may also not be on the line. And we farm on our side of the fence. And he said, we don't have anything that says you can or can't be doing this. We're just kind of seeking information. We need to get this resolved. And we said, okay, and he said, you need to take down the no trespassing sign. So we did that the following morning. He said, you need to set up a meeting with your district ranger. Her name is Julie Wheeler. So we did that. That meeting occurred May 1st. And they asked us kind of what our thoughts were. And we said, well, we had done a little research, and we said, well, it's worth noting in the west, fences are not on the line. They are in practical locations. And this particular fence, we're going to focus on the east side for this. We have about 20 acres on their side of the fence that we've always allowed to be managed as public property. The no trespassing sign was on the west side, but on the east side, we have about 20 acres on their side of the fence. And they have said they have around 25 acres on our side of the fence. So we suggested at the beginning of this May 1st meeting that we should just trade and get a survey done. And then whoever owes who for the balance of the 3 to 5 acres, write a check, and we all just carry on, because it's always been this way. Charles' family has managed this land the same way since 1910. It's been through 3 different irrigation. It's been through flood irrigating, a big gun system, and now a pivot. Like this, nothing has changed in our lifetimes. And they said, well, yeah, we have some options. We need to look into them. And Julie said she had never been to our allotment, and she wanted to come and see it. We said, that'd be great. And she said, a survey takes several months to a year. And we said, all right, well, and But she did also point out, she asked, we had it planted to hay barley, and she asked, when will that crop need to be harvested? And we said around July 1st. And she said, we should have a resolution plan in place by then. But within the same meeting, we also suggested to Travis that he needed to work within the realm of the law when it came to private property rights and notify and request permission to cross our private property to this east side. And we said, you don't have to. In South Dakota, you can go up the waterway, up the Cheyenne River waterway if he didn't want to. But if he wanted to take the really quick way across our field, we wanted to be notified of that. And he did not appreciate that. It got a little heated there. But we got through that meeting. Everything seemed, for the most part, fine. And then 5 days later, on May 6th, Special Agent Lunder shows up and conducts a survey, doesn't allow us to participate. He told us the night before he'd be there and he'd be doing whatever he wanted. We have yet to see the results of that survey, and he staked out across this hay barley field, drove out through it and staked across it where he says the line is. And we don't know if he's right or wrong. We've never seen the results. So at that point, we became a little concerned. We reached out to our congressional delegation and some other people, and our Senator Round's staff agreed that this was a little abnormal and said they'd like to be involved in the next meeting. They couldn't make the day we had scheduled work. And so the first part of June, we're trying to reschedule that. Julie Wheeler stops communicating with us. And then on June 24th, Special Agent Lunder shows up at our home again and serves us with separate criminal felony indictments for theft of government property.
Okay. Just to go back a little bit. So your property is, when you say east and west, you're in the middle of federal lands, right? Yeah.
Right.
You have.
Yep. We have an 80 acres that sits in the middle of federal
Right.
land. Yep.
So you have a boundary line on both sides when you're talking about east and west.
It's
I've looked at a maps. Go ahead.
It's kind of a giant C, like
Yeah.
a block C. And we have federal in the middle on this side and federal down the back side of the C.
Right.
And then up above, we have more. But in this particular area, just think of a block C, because we own on three sides of the eastern part that the question is. And then on the back side of the C would be what we're referring to as the western part.
Yeah. So the C is what you own, and everything kind of around you is federal land. And when you're talking about the west side, well, to go back to the hunter real quick.
Yeah.
Is there a hunting season in March where you are?
No, I think a lot of this had occurred during deer hunting season, and he worked on it all winter long before he never confronted us with this until he had it figured out how he was going to handle this.
Oh, so did he tell you when? And he pretty much came to your house and said, I mean, he didn't say I've been trespassing, but he said I crossed your property.
No, but we in our conversation that day, we knew he'd trespassed because of what he was telling us that was so remarkable about down there, such as a spring that we've developed that, well, it was my great grandpa's water supply to his buildings, and it is out in the middle of this 80 acres
that we own.
Right.
And he had walked to that and looked it all over. I mean, he knew fine details about that and the center pivot and all that that's all on private land. Mm-hmm. And he admitted that.
Across your whole thing.
Yeah.
He said I went all over down there.
Yeah. Did he say why? Just to get to that other fence, or?
Oh, just because he's doing what he could do whatever he wanted. That was his thoughts.
Right. Yeah.
And that was the issue, is we didn't agree with that thought.
Yeah. And so that you say it got heated, and once he said that, you kind of realized he'd been trespassing. And
yeah.
Well, he admitted March 29th. That's when he complimented our spring system and the setup. There is no contention over the permanent components of the center pivot. It's the very end of it that passes over this acre in question. He complimented all of that. And at the beginning of this May 1st meeting, after we suggested trading, he said, well, how would you feel if your neighbor just came onto your property and did whatever he wanted and we didn't tell you? And I think I said at first, I said, this isn't that. And he said it again. He goes, no, how would you feel if your neighbor just kind of came on and did something on your property and didn't tell you? And Charles said it again, this isn't, we don't really understand the point here. And he asked it a third time, and he used our neighbor Frank Bloom. And he said, what would you do if Frank Bloom just came onto your property and did what he wanted and changed management and never told you? And I still can't remember what it's called, but I dated a U.S. Marshal for about 2 months, and he loved to tell me all about these techniques they would
Right.
use. And that's what it was trying to lead us into saying something that would, we could be assumed guilty on. And it hit me then. And so we just turned it around, and I asked him, and I was polite. I said, well, do you mean, what would I do if Frank Bloom acted in the manner that you have to this point, walking all over my property and doing whatever you want without notifying me? And he did not appreciate that.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it does sound like he was trying to get you going almost the
That's
way.
all he was doing in that whole March 29th thing. Yeah, he brought it to us, but he was sizing us up what we could afford to fight. Um, and he had already planned the attack.
We suspect.
And but he was just out to yeah, just size us up,
Yeah,
honestly.
and intimidate almost and to
Yep.
start.
And try to get us to give him something that he could use against us.
Yeah. And so when he left that day, did you think right then he'd been working on this since the fall?
We knew he'd been working on it for a while, but not that. I mean, not that long. But the longer we went in this deal,
Yeah.
we had a feeling that he'd been working on it for a while.
Yeah.
I don't think we really thought a whole lot of it at first. I mean, we hadn't back to this, like, this had been going on since before we were born, and it was just kind of like, oh, okay, well, if this needs fixed now,
Let's do it.
we're happy to
Yeah.
fix it. Yeah, like, we haven't done anything different. All we've changed is the way it's watered. So I don't think we had any idea what was coming.
Mm-hmm. And to be clear to people listening, you deal with Forest Service all the time, right? So you have cattle on the ground on the other side of the fence, right? Is that right? You have the permit?
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
our permit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And we're still in good standing. And we use it in the winter. You can't just use your permit whenever you want. You have to set that up with the Forest Service, and they have an AUM grazing numbers time frame. And so we deal with them every single year in setting that up. We've never had an issue with them, never had a big issue with them, never had an issue with any of these individual people involved in this. They've never sent us a notice that we've done anything wrong, that that we've mismanaged, that there's a problem, an issue. We turned out everything went fine in 24. We remain in good standing. We've emailed them where we're a winter allotment user. We get that all determined after we've preg checked in the fall. So we've emailed them this spring and asked, are we good to go with our normal procedure to contact you after we preg check this fall? And we've received an email back that says, yes, that will be fine. So we've dealt with them. Charles has dealt with them since he became the owner of that allotment when he was in his
2002.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
sitting down and having them come in and have a meeting, it's not completely out of the. I mean, I just want to kind of explain things because, like, where I'm from, people don't deal with federal lands, and for people that's listening, but yeah, so I mean, you're using both sides of the fence now, and they're coming
So
in and
so here's something that'll probably just trip your trigger too. Is the east side of our hay meadow doesn't have any water in it. It goes so when we use it, the river's froze. There isn't any water. The only way for our cows to get water is to turn them back on our private land. So since I have operated it, this has been the case. So both sides of this fence in question gets used at the same time by just opening gates for cattle to come back onto our private land. So if the grazing is an issue, I just don't know why it's an
yeah,
issue, because the gates get opened and you use both pieces of property together.
right, yeah,
these are
yeah. I mean,
two. Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
These are just two lots too. That's part of why this is so difficult. This isn't a quarter or a half section or an easily described. These are two lots 2 and 3 on the Cheyenne River. Like, they are really hard. It's rough country. It's a river. You have to go almost a mile away to get to a point you can survey from to really do a good job. So it's in all components, not just ours, but this is a gray area.
Mm-hmm.
and we've always just had this mutual working agreement and relationship with the Forest Service on using it.
Mm-hmm. So this other guy that came for the meeting, I mean, what you're saying, it sounds like he was purposely trying to not understand. Like saying the fence has always been there. This isn't us going onto someone else's property. Like if you like that's pretty easy to understand. Was the other guy involved in the meeting much or?
It was March 29th meeting. The second gentleman, he just appeared to be there in the capacity of his job. He wasn't.
He was just a law enforcement guy there. They never go to get alone. They
Okay.
always have someone with them.
But he was Forest Service.
Yeah.
He was. He
Okay.
was a patrol captain, yeah. But no, he didn't seem to be the. It was very clear that Special Agent Lunders was who had done the research and the work prior to that meeting, and that Summers was just there as the second employee to us.
Yeah. And so then I guess out of that meeting, you find he tells you he's going to survey it. Or you had this meeting where they told you it'd be a year for your survey.
Yeah,
Yep.
several months to over a year. And that was at the May 1st meeting, and that one was with Julie Wheeler and Travis Lund.
Did you ask him who would pay for the survey?
Yeah, it was discussed. I believe I don't recall how that went, but we did discuss that. I think we would have held part of the responsibility. It might have been joint. I don't recall the details, but we did
Yeah.
discuss all that. It'd take a long time. It's pretty in depth to be able to schedule it, and then there would be some costs incurred by it.
Right. Yeah, they're pretty pricey, I think is why a lot of people don't get them. And because they're kind of a pain to get. And especially like I've talked before about surveying, like I'm into history and read those books. And back when they first surveyed that stuff, it was a lot of railroad surveyors and people, but they would just pile up a stack of rocks,
Right.
and that'd be a corner. And I don't know if they'd eyeball or if they'd actually run a line or what. But I mean, when you're talking out where you are, that's a lot of miles to cover.
Well, a lot of times they use a bearing tree.
Hmm.
Well, you know what happens to trees over time.
Right, yeah. And I've also heard that the river is a property line, right? The Cheyenne River is a property line in that county. So as that river
Well,
moves,
it's
the property line moves.
this thing's a mess. So in Pennington, Custer County, and in Hawken County, South Dakota, they used whoever surveyed it back in the day, 1880s or whatever it was. You stopped at the bank on the river instead of going to the center of the channel.
Hmm.
So now, the river's still not running where it did in 1880. It has moved. So we have this, yeah, say like lot 4, for instance, or lot 2 and 3, for instance, the ones that we're fighting over here, they end at what was once the old river channel. Well, the river has moved almost a quarter mile east of that now.
Hmm.
So there's this gray area of who even owns where the river used to run.
Right.
And so there might, this varies from 3 to 600 feet wide, a strip between these two counties that go up and down the river.
Yeah.
And so to find that area, which is called a meandering river, it takes a lot of survey and a lot of time to figure out where the ends of these lots actually end.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I guess to go back into the timeline there, it was between so you had met with Rounds because you felt like, did you feel like you were being bullied at the time or they weren't listening to you or what? Why would, I mean, that seems like a big step, right? To get a hold of your state senator and set up a meeting.
Well, we didn't meet with Senator Rounds himself. We called his staff, his
Hmm.
ag staff man in Rapid City. And Senator Rounds has a history of dealing with federal agents. And I guess we were just a little, when a federal agent says, I'm doing a survey on your property, you don't need to attend, and I'm going to do whatever I want. And he quoted some state statute, South Dakota state statute, as to why he could trespass wherever he wanted. Just the tone of all of that. And I think
Hmm.
it's always important to let your elected officials know if you think there might be an issue. That's
Right.
just, so we just were it was kind of a proactive, and to ask, is this normal? Because we've never had a problem. And he said, no, it's This is not normal.
Well, in order for a trade to happen also, it's a congressional act. So we are thinking to maybe speed this up a little bit. We'd start talking to rounds about, hey, we would love to see you present this before Congress if we can get all the paperwork and whatnot in order to get it to you.
Mm-hmm.
So that was part of our initial, I guess, action, was to maybe speed up the actual trade in this thing,
Yeah, and
long term.
yeah,
So,
and to go back to people not familiar, trading federal lands is not a rare thing, I guess. Like it's something that happens. Like looking at that, I've looked at that 777 ranch. You said that guy traded a lot of his land with federal land to get his property all in one piece. Things like that go on, especially in your county, right?
yep, yep.
Yeah, the U.S. Forest Service, they have acts and statutes and things in place specifically designed to clean up situations when they come up just like this. Like,
Right. And I actually still have this quote for people. So as this was going on, I was listening to this podcast where a forest supervisor was they were talking to him about the main thing was all the firings and different things going on at the issue. But as it happened, I'm sitting there eating lunch and we had been doing these podcasts talking about your issue, and the guy says, um, he talking about Small Tracts Act. So had you heard of that before? Like before any of
we
this started, you were familiar with the Small Tracts Act?
not familiar, but we were aware it existed.
Yeah.
Well,
But
and the
he,
Small Tracts Act is actually what they end up using to do trades.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I hadn't, like I said, we don't deal with federal land. I'd never heard of it. So I think this might help people kind of understand. And this forest supervisor would have been the guy, he was in charge of White River National Forest, I believe in Colorado. Um, but he said, and because there's so much like second home building there in Colorado, all these rich people are coming out and building big houses for their second home. And he said homeowners that butt up against, talking about federal lands, he said, as more and more people move into the forested lands, a lot of it, they have to get an easement from the Forest Service to put a driveway in or to put a power line in, or they have a crappy survey and they ended up building part of their house, which happens all the time on National Forest System lands. And then we say, hey, you got to move your house, or there's this thing called the Small Tracts Act where they can purchase land if it was proven it was done accidentally, had a bad survey or something. So I mean, it's very clear to these forest people. That's something they use all the time. Like he says it in there, it happens all the time. And he's talking about different houses and stuff, but it's for anything under 40 acres, I believe, that comes up. And I read the Small Tracts Act, and also it said if it no longer has characteristics of the federal land or of the forest, which means you farmed it for for generations now. I mean, it's like written for your issue. Um, when you bring this up with the Julie Wheeler meeting, the second meeting, or did they bring it up at all? Or
It was we didn't discuss it specific to the Small Tracts Act, but we discussed the options of buying or trading or
Special use agreement.
Yep, they have a
for that.
they can offer you a special use permit to continue whatever you were doing until a resolution is put into place. And that we had mentioned that, and there wasn't really, I wouldn't say there was a definitive yes or no. It was just there was no direction determined on that day, really. And she really, at that time, indicated she wanted to see it, but that we would be able to determine a direction at our follow-up meeting that then never occurred.
did you ask to see the survey results at that meeting? I'm guessing.
Well, they happened 5 days after that meeting is when
Okay.
he showed up to survey. And yeah, we've requested those. Nothing.
Other than stakes and,
Yeah.
that they've drove in across our field. I mean, and here's the other side of that too, is that was done by the Forest Service themselves as survey crew.
Right.
In order to have an official survey done there, that needed to be BLM
Right.
because they have congressional direction to do surveys, not the Forest Service.
Yeah.
Somewhere between March 29th and June 24th, someone or a handful of people decided that instead of seeking resolution with us, they would simply destroy us. And that's really hard on our side to wrap our heads around because we were providing information in good faith that we were seeking a resolution. And at some point, that information was being used. I don't know what they were doing. It's to build a criminal indictment case against us, which there was no intent to commit a crime. I don't know how you steal land, and you came in good faith. They never gave us this written notice, which is also supposed to be a requirement. So it's a really crazy thing. It's hard still to sit here and talk to you about it and be like, yeah, this all happened. And I think there's a lot of components to this we're never going to fully understand. But yeah, somewhere in that time frame, on their side, someone somewhere decided we aren't going to resolve this with them, even though there are A, B, C, and D options available. We're just going to destroy them. And that's what criminal does. These attorneys have said, yeah, and they can show you examples where they have thrown the landowner in jail. Right. I visited with Brett Tolman this last week, and he told me about one, and a father and a son were thrown in jail for 18 months. And while they were in jail, they utilized eminent domain to get the property away from the family, and they've now lost everything. And so we were the first that they attempted this exact tactic on, but this is not new, unfortunately. And I don't think we'll ever have all the answers to exactly what happened in that time frame. While we just thought we were working towards, the Small Tracts Act, or let's do a trade, or let's run it through a member of Congress on a bill so that we can purchase it from you for this amount.
Right.
So yeah, it's still really hard to just wrap our heads around that someone somewhere that would be their goal. Yeah.
And to go, you keep bringing up Congress, like that Small Tracts Act. It does say it has to be approved by USDA secretary, I believe. And so that kind of goes to where you're meeting with Rounds and trying to push this into the federal government. Does make sense. But to look back on it now, you say it was between that meeting where they decided to destroy you. Is that what you think, or do you think it was before that meeting, or when this first started, they were?
I don't know if it was just they decided they were going to destroy us prior to that meeting, but they sure had they had done a lot of work to gather information on us, on the property, trespassed all over us to find, all the details down there. That all came out between either April 29th meeting here at our house, or March 29th meeting, and May 1st meeting in Hot Springs.
Yeah.
And we don't know. I know you've covered a lot of these other issues in our area. And this is something else we may never know was this attempting to set precedent to go after something larger? Was this the small, insignificant thing where they utilized this technique to then have it in their toolbox to use in bigger fashions? Or did we just make an individual federal employee mad? Or was it I don't think we'll ever know the answers to that either.
That goes to the problem with no transparency. Then you end up with people like me creating just looking around what is going on here, and I'm gonna publicly show what I'm doing just because I think people need to know. Just constantly question what is going on. When things don't make sense, you have to try to make sense of them somehow. So you can blame me for coming up with theories, or blame anybody for coming up with theories, but the real person to blame is the people who are doing things and not telling the public why they're doing them.
Well, and one of the things that transparency goes out the door since, I think it was mid-90s, they took all the law enforcement out of these agencies and put them in their standalone sector, I guess, or division. So now law enforcement doesn't even have to communicate with management of these agencies. They can kind of do their own thing.
You're talking your special agent Lunders in this case doesn't have to communicate with the Forest Service at all about his case, what he's doing.
And his hierarchy is in Washington.
Right.
It used to be that the the rangers were the law of the land, and the law enforcement worked for them, and they were
Hmm.
a part of the community. Well, if
Right.
he went down to so and so's birthday party, he got quizzed why he was treating somebody in such a way. So
Hmm.
the community kept a check on it back then. Now they've removed that from our communities and from the control of the management, and they just do whatever they want,
They are
Right.
unchecked.
unchecked.
Yeah.
Yeah. To go back into this Forest Servant interview or podcast I listened to, um, he said he was a pro Forest Service person and kind of sticking up for him, but he also said they could reduce that department by 40% and of the people working there. They could reduce 40% of it and it would all come out of Washington DC. Like there's just a giant bureaucracy there. And
Top
like
heavy.
that's kind of not doing anything or doing these kind of things. But to get back to, I guess, to be indicted, like we hear these things like you theft of government property, felony, prison time, all this stuff, and it makes people think like almost picture you guys getting hauled out in cuffs, right? Like you had to be arrested to get this kind of stuff, but they showed up at your house, right? Can you kind of explain how that went?
Well, he just came. He was fully dressed, he definitely had a vest on and his gear and whatnot, but he wasn't under tactical, in tactical outfit, I guess, coming out of the back of a truck or anything stupid like that.
But
But like some had said,
did he look the same way as he'd had the first time he came?
I would say so.
Yeah.
Yep. And and then he just left a summons with us to appear in court,
Hmm.
is all he did that day. And so then we started researching what that all meant. First of all, we didn't know. And so he suggested we find our lawyers. Otherwise, some court appointed lawyers were for us. And then, of course, we had to go through we got closer to the court hearing. We had to do all the court interviews, which is pretty much figure you out whether you're a flight risk, how much money you have, whether you have guns, whether you drink alcohol, who your parents are, who your siblings are, where they live. Um, I'm trying to think of what else they asked. How many vehicles you had? I mean, it's out there. How much land you have? Um,
So you're getting asked the same questions as drug dealers and murderers and all that kind of stuff. And
and we
this,
had some of the nicest ladies doing it. They were just like, I don't know, understand this, but here I am doing my job,
hmm.
and
But to go back to when he just kind of came, handed you the papers and left. I mean,
Yeah, that's something that kind of got blown up in the media. And I would also point out that when you criminally charge people, anything that we said could and would be used against us. So our attorney said you can't. The court said we couldn't speak to each other about the case, but our attorney said you should not speak to the press about this. So there were some inaccuracies that got out in the press, one of them being that he arrested us that day. But when you can't speak, you not only can you not tell your side of the story, but you cannot correct what comes out about the other side. So no,
yeah.
we were not arrested that day. I don't know if it was tactical gear or not. It's what they standard wear. It was, a vest and the belt with the gun and the cuffs and the spray and stuff on it. But that's what the law enforcement side wears all the time. And I don't know why they need to wear that all the time and be armed at 100% of the time. But that is the standard that they are
did
wearing.
he read you your rights?
No, we were
No.
never read our rights at any point.
Um, and but he said you would want, had you talked to a lawyer before that?
No,
Not like a real estate lawyer or somebody.
no, we
Um,
had well, we had consultants. We had
right.
Forest Service consultants we were dealing with, because they had been through the Small Tracks Act. They had been down
Yeah.
this road before. They'd fought the wilderness for some of our neighbors and whatnot, and was a big part of that. So we reached out to them for
But he
advice.
told you when he showed up that you couldn't talk to each other?
No,
So
Oh, he
that
didn't?
occurred. Yeah, that occurred at the magistrate court hearing. So that was the judge at that hearing, and they are just explaining basically what rights we have lost. And we lost the right to bear arms, and that was the judge. We lost the right to communicate to each other about the case, because if you have drug dealer A and drug dealer B, they don't want you corroborating your story. And they didn't know what to do with us because the court system has never dealt with a criminal indictment on a land issue either. It's a civil issue. And so that all came out of the court as we went through our indictment hearing.
The way it was described to me, my court appointed lawyer, the reason they separated us, so if she wanted to blame me for it all, she could, or vice versa. It gave her the security that she could actually say the truth, and I wouldn't be sitting in a room with her, so to speak.
Or threatening her when you're at home, or
Right.
I mean,
Yep.
it goes back to like, yeah, you're being treated like drug dealer or
Yep.
dangerous
That's what you got to think
criminal.
about at that point is we're nasty drug dealers.
And you had to
that's
be.
how you wrap your head around it.
Meanwhile, we're married and we're running this business together, and we've just lost the feed base that this operation has relied on for 114 years, and you can't talk about it.
Yeah. So you had to be pretty shell-shocked at this moment, right? I mean, going into the courthouse and getting these questions and like when you went to the courthouse, did you have any idea that that's what you were going to come out and no guns, no talking, like
we were just happy to come out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that week between being indicted, it was conveniently over the 4th of July, so we had about 5 business days to get attorneys. We had to do a conservatorship agreement with our kids and sit down with our kids that were turning 7 and 9 right then as this all happened and explain to them, like,
they might not come home.
Yeah, they can arrest you at the indictment hearing. If the court determines you're a flight risk or any number of other things, they can arrest you, or they can make sure you have to pay a bond to get out of jail. And you're trying to research all of this and figure it out, and then you're sitting down and explaining this to your small children. And yeah, that was the hardest week of this whole thing. The whole thing has been hard, but that week was that was tough. You come out of that hearing and you call and tell your kids that you get to come home. Yeah, and that's part of, and then we walked across that field as a family after they surveyed it, and they drove across our field and they staked out across it. From that moment up through that court hearing, that's when we decided that I don't care what you do. We didn't do anything wrong. We were working with you, and this is so wrong on so many levels. And you think you're going to bring a war against us and just squash us like a bug, and you've got another thing coming. Because, I mean, Charles a really nice guy, but I'm not built like that. And they went after my family. They went after Charles' family legacy. And they had nothing. They did it all just to destroy us. There was no intent on our part. I mean, so we stood up and fought as best as we could. And for the last year, Charles has kept our place going. Fortunately, we have a good hired man, but I have fought this for the last year because that's wrong. That's just fundamentally wrong. We're God-fearing people. And so we prayed and we fought, because after that week right there, that was enough.
Yeah. And so that was July of last year.
Yeah, July 8th was that hearing.
And that's when you both had to retain separate attorneys. Did the judge at all, was he like, what is going on here at all? Or were they just...
No, it was a woman, and nope, she was just entering you into, her job was, she wasn't even who would have heard it had we gone to trial. Her job was just to enter us in the court system and say, you guys no longer have these rights, and you have to do A, B, and C. Do you understand? Yep. And then she'd go to the prosecution. You have to prove this and this and this, and you have to do A, B, and C. Do you understand? Yes. It was like 20 minutes.
And they brought four counts against us?
Yeah, and we still don't fully understand all of that.
Four felony counts?
Yep. Maximum sentence of 10 years in jail, $250,000 each. And this Brett Tolman said, yeah, they were serious about it. These other attorneys be like, oh, you've never had an offense. You wouldn't have gone to jail. But he said, no.
Right.
He said, I've seen this play out. And yeah, they were going to destroy you. They were going to destroy your place, and they were going to destroy your family.
Yeah. And you're dealing with like local attorneys who have never, I mean, no one's ever really seen this, I guess, rarely within, in the U.S.
They deal with drugs, rapes, murders.
Yeah.
stuff like that. But man,
You
when you
needed
brought
a
them,
real estate attorney, and
yes,
you were forced to get a criminal attorney.
right,
Exactly. Yeah.
right,
And yeah, real estate, land, private property rights attorneys, they all practice in the civil court system. It's different between criminal and civil because that's where these issues land. So we did have a few over the last year offer their expertise on that. So you're trying to mold that expertise over into the criminal side, and those guys neither know nor really care about it. They don't understand the significance of it to our family or to our industry. And it was very apparent from early on that while this was huge for us, this was a really big deal for agriculture and private property rights in general, too. And those criminal attorneys, they zero understanding of the implications of this case.
Hmm. So you are almost fighting your lawyers and fighting this case at the same time.
the lawyer's done what we asked him to do to prolong it or to, to keep the thing going out so we didn't have to go to trial and stuff like that. I mean, they did what we asked them to do. But as far as them getting involved in it and fixing it and trying to fight ahead of time, it was done by Heather.
Right. Like demanding a survey. I would think
Right.
the second you get this case, you have to demand the results of that survey. And
Exactly.
as
And
it's federal, I would think it should still be open to a FOIA request, right? Like
yeah,
it's
FOIAs are
federal.
great and all, but we haven't received the results of any of a lot of people have FOIA'd on our behalf. And
Right.
they can sure drag their feet on that too.
Or
Yeah,
they give you some, oh, you're too broad. We need it more detailed. Well, that just took another 3 months to tell you you were too broad. So it
mm-hmm.
just draws it out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so when this all, you said you were trying to extend the time. That was kind of the goal from the get-go.
Well, we didn't know where we were headed.
Right.
We needed time to pull everything together to start with, and then once we just kind of we had the ability to prolong it as long as we could.
And our attorneys, that was kind of on their recommendation
Yeah,
also. Um,
and then see how the election ended
When
up too.
Right. So when this first happened, did you have what was the original date this was going to go to trial or?
September something, wasn't it?
Oh, really? So
Yeah,
last year, September.
yeah,
mhm.
Yeah. And
And they
so,
said it's pretty rare for a criminal case to go on its first court date. That what we did was common. They bump these things out, and you can go out to about a year, and then the judge is going to say, "Hey, either figure it out or
yeah.
get it through my system."
So on the other side of this too is towards the end, the prosecutor was asking for more time to get details together about the case and whatnot, and to figure out what direction we're headed. And so if he happened to ask for added time, then that gave an automatic, it had to go to trial within 120 days.
The prosecutor.
The prosecutor, if he asked for it. If we continue to ask for it, we could ask for as much as 30, 60, 90 days at a time.
Hmm.
So there's some trigger points in the court system too, that if the prosecutor shows where they can't prosecute you correctly, then that forces it to trial
Hmm.
too.
So you could have been in
What?
prison right now,
Right.
like, which
Yeah.
I'm sure has crossed your mind before. But you did mention the election, and you were, I'm guessing you were looking towards that.
Well, we
Because this
assumed,
is in the end of Tom Vilsack, Joe Biden.
Yep.
This is on there. This is the administration that brought this upon you, and there's been so much, private property rights, all that kind of stuff during the Biden administration. Um, and so I'm guessing you were looking to that election and pretty hopeful.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, my attorney suggested we try to get out beyond it because he said your fight's the same if Harris wins, but if
Mhm.
Trump wins, you need to take this political. And so that was
Right.
his recommendation. And so yeah, yep.
So I'm guessing you
And
had a pretty good election night.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
finally a win, right?
Yeah.
Like
we,
a little
we had
bit
a
of relief.
well, there wasn't any relief, I don't think, until last 2 Fridays
Right.
ago when we
Yeah.
found out the drop. But yeah, some hope.
Right.
Yeah, some hope.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Had new people to work with.
yeah.
That
Right.
was going to be the big thing, when honestly, from November to 1st of February, nothing happened.
Nothing.
I mean, it was pretty silent because we were just waiting for people to get in the right spots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's hard too when your life's on the line and nobody knows anything.
Right. And I was told too, like, I was questioning Chad, and Chad always had the information, but he was said, well, we're just going to be quiet about it until after inauguration. Was that something you were told by your attorneys, or?
Well, there just wasn't anything to tell. And,
Right.
and yeah, we appreciated Shad was one of a handful of people that would just reach out to us every couple months. And you'd say, well, you can't discuss details, but my attorney said you can tell them like when it's extended or anything like that. So yeah, yep. They just suggested we wait, and there was nothing to tell because there was nothing happening on the
Hmm.
case side, just bumping along.
Honestly, it was 3 or 4 months of festering is
Yeah.
what went on. It just festered in people, period,
Yeah.
all
Hmm.
over.
Right.
And it ended up when the thing finally broke, it was worth it, I
Yeah.
guess.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's when I first heard about it, I've said too, like I'm like, there's got to be more to it, right? And to go back to your girls at Tri-State, if you haven't read Heather's piece, I'll link it in the description here. But she writes for Tri-State Livestock, which is a regional livestock publication, and has friends there that were able to kind of spread the word on what was going on a little bit. And when I first read it, I'm like, this can't be. Like, I mean, I wasn't, I was just kind of like, well, there's got to be more to it, and it'll come out, and this will work itself out. But then as time goes on and you hear more details, it's kind of like, what in the world? And so I guess to go into it, yeah, and you wrote, I read your piece around Christmas, and it kind of gave just a perspective. You couldn't write anything about the case, but as you read that, you can read, this mother who's dealing with Christmas and has, a prison term ahead of her, and it was knowing that, it was kind of powerful to read, like just gave some perspective on what you're like. You have all this stress around Christmas, but you couldn't even put in the
The
big
real
stress.
stress.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. And so to find out, I guess right before the charges, this whole thing starts rolling. Like, people were talking. Keely Cavello got her article out. I think that's kind of what, and Shad was telling me we got to get on this deal. And Tri-State Livestock, America Own One. That's where I got all my information on this kind of stuff, and that's why we were talking about it. But also, Shad was digging every day, it seemed like, and making phone calls and all that. And when that was going on, I mean, what were you starting to get more hopeful, or how was it going for you guys? Because you couldn't even talk to anybody, but you were just almost like on the inside watching. You weren't on the outside watching what's going on. You were on the inside watching everybody else talk about it on the outside.
Well, we appreciate everything that you did, Shad did, Keely, everyone. Yeah, it was crazy to watch it build. A big part, and we're really thankful for this, is my parents decided to do some news. So we hooked them up with Rachel Gable. She gave them a little crash course in Zoom interviews.
Hmm.
Um, and that really helped build it. But yeah, it was just crazy to watch it, and you're just hopeful. It kind of ebbed and flowed for the whole last year, and that last time it just felt like it was reaching hundreds of thousands more people than any time before. So you're just like, well, God, maybe this is the time, and
Right.
we're people of faith, and I Charles didn't have this sense, but I did from day one that God was going to carry us through this, and we were going to come out right where we are now, and it's not over. Um, but I just had a sense that because the people were going to see it for what it was, and you could just see that build as you
Yeah.
dug into it, as Keely dug into it, that people were just like, just what you said. At first, everyone was like, no way. Or, if this is this crazy, it's going to go away on its own. And then when it didn't, and when it came back around, everybody was just like, this is ridiculous and it's
Hmm.
insane and we can't allow it. And just to see that people backing you and the support. The entire ag industry backed us, and how fantastic. We don't always all get along, but everybody recognized this for the right and wrong that it was, and I think it was great. We all got a win on this,
Right.
and I think we should all celebrate that. Like I said, it's not over, but to get criminal charges dropped, that only happens, they say, 5% of the time. And so we celebrate that, and we thank you and everyone else, because it was very humbling to sit on the inside of that and watch your industry and people you know and love, all the way up to people you've never met that are complete strangers, just take up the torch and fight for you and for the issue and for the impact that it was going to have.
We formed an army.
We did.
Yeah.
And I think we just started it long before our indictment, and people continued for a year and it came from everywhere. I mean, 90-year-old lawyers that had fought a similar case call you. You have somebody that had dealt with this same cop somewhere call you. And it's just, it came from every direction. No matter where you went, people were in support of it. And outside of a few Facebook warriors, I guess you would say, there hasn't been a bad comment hardly said about us and what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, and those bad comments are obviously uninformed, I guess. Like, and it's pretty obvious, everybody, it's pretty obvious where they sit politically, right? Like the Trump administration let you off, and so they're gonna hate on it, right? I mean, that's what I've seen. But just to kind of, I mean, they don't deserve any time, but to talk about celebrating it's weird too and I'm sure you feel it way more, to celebrate a win, but a win that you never should have had to fight for, So it's almost like we're celebrating this thing that the government actually persecuted people for nothing. So, it's still kind of it's mixed feelings, I guess. But when all that was going on, how did you find out, I guess? Did you have a sense that the charges were going to be dropped, or who were you talking to when this kind of came down?
Yeah. We've had hundreds of people say, hey, you need to reach out to so-and-so.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was Brett Tolman. And so about 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I called him and he didn't answer. I gave it a week, tried him again, and he didn't answer. Well, then he called me back 2 weeks ago on a Wednesday. And he said, I've been following this. He actually found Keely on Instagram. And he said, am I hearing this right? And he asked a couple questions. And I said, yep. He goes, it seems to me like, he goes, I have 2 questions. Did you guys build the fence? And I said, no, it's been there. Forest Service records say 1950. So that's the youngest it is 1950. And he said, okay. And he goes, and am I reading this right, that we kind of have an overzealous 1 or 2 people in combination with the general government BS? And I said, well, I'd consider that pretty accurate. And I said, well, we are working. We have a bunch of information going to the new USDA Secretary of Ag, Brooke Rollins. And he goes, well, I know her. I said, great. Yeah. And so he reached out to her, and we had been working really hard through numerous channels to get information to her that she wanted so she could educate herself on this, because she's asking the same questions everybody else asked a year ago. So he reaches out to her and he calls me back and he's like, I think we're going to be able to get this dropped after a year in one afternoon.
Yeah, really 4 days it took.
Yeah. And he calls again that evening, and Charles was in then, and he's like, yeah, I think we're going to be able to do this. Don't mention anything. We want to go through the proper channels, but I just want to give you some encouragement. Small chance. There's a chance you might come to DC. I'm like, okay. So Friday he calls and says, I think we're going to, they're gone. You need to wait for it to come down through the system, but they're gone. The UASA's office might be looking at something civil, but we don't know, but the criminal charges are gone. And I'm like, I need to tell my mom and Charles' mom. And he goes, oh yeah, you can tell your moms. And we said, all right. And so we brand Saturday, right? And Sunday morning, you're sitting there with your post-branding cup of coffee and a daze looking at your your countertop full of crock pots and roasting pans. And he's like, so you guys have your tickets to DC? And I'm like, no. He's like, you better get them. So we booked our whole family a trip to DC on Sunday. We plan it and pack Monday. We fly out Tuesday morning. And then Wednesday morning is this press conference, Brooke Rollins' first press conference on the steps of the USDA building. And it's on the way there that he's like, because like you said, it's like, well, what is going to happen? It's not really over. We can't use the land until it's resolved. We might have more court related stuff coming up. We just don't know. And he's finally like, I don't think you two realize what you've done. And we're like, no, I don't think we've done, it doesn't feel like we've done anything. This is on the way to this press conference. And he's like, well, only 5% of criminal cases are ever dismissed. You guys have just accomplished almost the impossible. He goes, they were going to throw you in jail and they were going to destroy your place and they were out to destroy you. And he said, you need to pause this morning and celebrate this win because it's huge. This does not happen. You know, and we attribute that to God as well. He brought us this to walk through, and then he gave us an impossible situation, and then he gave us the nearly impossible solution, right? And there's just no way that we in our humanity could have done that. So we find that out on the way to this press conference. And so it is just this huge range of emotions that day. I mean, you're so overwhelmed and you think it's not over. And then he explains to you like the real scope. And when you're in the middle of it and you're just trying to get through it and you're trying to find the solution, you don't really look at the 10 years in prison part every single day, or I didn't. But when that hits you on the way there, yeah, they were going to throw you in prison and they were going to destroy your husband's family legacy and they were going to make someone else raise your children. It was like, whoa. You know, and you get there and you meet Brooke Rollins on the outside of the USDA, and she is just as personable in person as she comes across when we view her online or on the news. And then we met all of the other people that stood up there with us ahead of time, and they said, you can say a few words if you want. And you better believe it, after you haven't been able to talk for a year, you bet I'm going to say a few words. Charles wasn't going to. Like we said, that gag order didn't bother Charles one bit. It bothered me. So that whole day was just from Friday, finding out they're dropped, and then Saturday you brand, and then Sunday you find out you're going to DC, and then Tuesday you're in DC, and Wednesday you're standing on the steps of the USDA building, and you have your own room that says Maude Family Prep Area or what. We're still kind of wrapping our heads around it, you know, and then you sit down and you start working on how would we like to resolve this with these new attorneys. And it's, you know, and then it's just been, we did press while we were out there, quite a bit of press. Want to give a big, you know, a shout out to Caitlin Glover with PLC, because when I planned this, I called her and I said, hey, these are the people, if at all possible, that I'd like to meet while I'm out there to thank, and you're one of them. And she said, well, do you want me to schedule the others for you, Heather? I was like, you know, if you don't mind, I'm a little busy packing my bag. And she did. And we got it all taken care of. We did all of it. You know, did the press conference, did 2 full days of press conference, press meetings. And then we took our kids and we saw some sights. Yeah. But yeah, we went from this year-long battle to poof, you know, back to where you started on May 1st of last year in a matter of like 4 days. And it was, yeah, we're still kind of reeling in the aftermath of that.
Yeah. I think Charles is reeling in the aftermath of all that meetings. When you just asked that question, he was mouthing no in the background. Do you want to meet with all these people? You didn't see that, but you might later, I guess. But yeah,
everything until they put makeup on me at Fox.
Oh,
get rid of some glare, you know, and whatnot. And I was like, let's get out of this place.
Thankfully, it was not that makeup lady's first day on the job, and it was very apparent because Charles was not a first day client, but she had him in that chair, de-shined and out in like 22 seconds. You're gonna sit right here, sir.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
Well, he was done. Yep, Charles was.
And I suppose
go ahead. I was gonna say, fortunately, Charles has been married to a media person now for 11 years, so we've kind of gradually I've drug him through some of this from time to time, and he's been on his share of magazine covers and stuff. So
Oh,
while
yeah.
he does not seek it,
The paparazzi always find you.
yeah, he's been he and my editor friends and I, we've kept him, fairly in the spotlight for a guy that would just like to farm and be left alone.
Well, sometimes that comes in handy, huh? I guess
Yep.
you've had some training
Yep.
and
Yep.
you did great on everything I saw. So, um, but I'm guessing when you came home, it was kind of, I mean, everybody knows what it's like to get home after a trip, but I can't imagine what it was like to get home after that trip. It probably felt like you're home after a year-long trip. Um,
We
and
crawled off an airplane at 10 o'clock that night, the Saturday night. We were at a branding at 8 o'clock the next morning with all of our neighbors. You talked about a press conference.
yeah. Oh man. Yeah. So you didn't slow down before you left and you didn't slow down when you got home.
No.
Mm-mm.
Well, you know
So
what spring's like.
yeah, right. Well, I'm not in the branding area, but I do know what it's like up there. Um, but I guess I was one question, how'd your kids take it when you told them? Like did they understand?
Not immediately, I don't think, which we didn't either, but they helped us. We when you start out by explaining to your kids you might go to jail, we then
Mhm.
determined that they would be appraised of this as we went. So they knew.
Well, they were in almost every meeting
They were
except for the May 1st meeting.
they
I
were.
mean, they were present so
So
that they knew what was going on.
and we prayed as a family every night that our innocence would be proven, that we would be able to resolve this, and then that God would guide us in how to seek justice if we were called to do so. And so then we got to thank God for
Right.
proving our innocence. And so they were in on that, and so we just told them we won that part. And that was the whole point. In every conversation, like our daughter's halfway to being a paralegal. She helped with a lot of that. And our son did a lot of chores that I used to run out and do and without griping. So I think it hit them after they got home a couple of days and they realized like we won. But for our family, it's not over because we can't touch the land, right? Until this resolution to the actual property is resolved. So
So
like
you can't
it's
even
this
go on the property?
well, we can walk on it, but you can't
You
farm
can't
it like
farm
it's
it.
always been done. You can't do anything on it. So it's like we had this huge win, but for us, until Charles is back in that field, utilizing it in the way that his family has for this 114 years, like for us, these are all just steps. And this was a huge step, but it was a step in the right direction to getting us back to where we have our feed base, and it's really dry in western South Dakota this year. We would really
Right.
like to get that done. It is not fun to make a pivot payment and then have it produce zero.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah,
looking at
this
year
isn't
two.
just land sitting there. You got a big piece of equipment that you have to pay for too, huh?
Yeah, and it's a lot of money to replace the feed that we grow on that. So they
Right.
recognize it. I think now our whole family, our children and ourselves, we recognize this huge, huge milestone that we've accomplished, and we're just so thankful for that. But for us, it's not the end.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And my friend Jack, who's kind of going through, Jack Payne in Nevada is kind of going through a similar thing where they're eminent domaining a few hundred acres of his, and he described it as a ranch operates as a wheel with spokes, and when you pull one of them spokes out, the whole thing can collapse. And
yep,
I felt like that's the best analogy, and I'm sure you're feeling it. Like your spoke of that 80 acres, which is what you use to feed your animals,
that
has
might even
been
be the
pulled
hub.
out. Yeah, right. Yeah. Go back to the pivot reference. Maybe.
Yeah.
Um, but I guess you've had a couple weeks to think about it. I guess where you are now, where are you at now? You say it's a civil issue. You're back. You said you're back to where you were before the criminal charges, which means you. I guess you can just explain what that means.
We aren't sure if anything is coming on the civil side or not. We're confident if it does that the same evidence that resulted in the dropping of the criminal charges will result in that going away. But we're kind of uncertain on the legal side. But at this moment, we face no legal anything. So by saying we're back to May 1st of 2024, I mean that we are now to the point where we seek a resolution to this, what was originally described as a potential boundary issue to us. So now we seek, how do we resolve this so that we, in our case, so that we can continue to operate this land the way Charles family has for this 114 years. That's our goal now. So we now work with various entities to determine what is the best course of action to ensure that, and what is the method. Do you go back to the small tracts? Do you go back to color of title, which is a BLM resolution?
Interior
Department of Interior, but this land began as Department of Interior land, and in some cases you're grandfathered in. It goes back. It's complex to resolve it based upon the method we want to go with, or it can be very simple. So that's where we're at right now, is we're having those conversations on how is this resolved, so that because until it is resolved, we aren't going to be able to use it. So we now seek a resolution that gets us back on the land, and we would hope, they set a pretty aggressive timeline in 2024. So we would hope that they would be equally aggressive now in seeking a resolution to the issue in 2025. But once that resolution is sought, then it's just a matter of dotting your I's, crossing your T's, as we understand it, and assuming nothing else comes out of left field. But the Trump administration has been, they have been great thus far. They have been very proactive. They are living up to what they campaigned on. So I guess we're a lot more hopeful and optimistic that we are going to get that point of, crossing the I's, dotting the T's, signing the paperwork, and then we would hopefully have another story for you on what the resolution is and then what that means.
Yeah. So you're back to where you could possibly use the Small Tracts Act, possibly trade. But as far as you using the land, are you just, because you've missed planning, is that why, or you just aren't allowed to use it?
Or that's not allowed to use it.
And I guess we could go back to them at this point and request that special use permit until a resolution is sought. But once they've identified something like this, they won't tell you can't use it, but they very strongly suggest you not use it until a resolution is determined. Mm-hmm. So you get back into that gray area. And
they like to keep it in the gray area.
Yep.
And this is all through the Forest Service.
That's the Forest Service we're referring to. Yep.
And the person in charge of the Buffalo Gap, the supervisor of the grassland, had retired on the day. I don't know if he retired. The article I read said that his last day was the day your charges were dismissed. Had you dealt with him before? Is it Isaacs was his last name, I believe?
Isaacs was his name. Yeah, I have never personally dealt with him. Lots of my neighbors have. Anytime he was in a meeting, there was issues. There was, he was kind of above where we normally would deal with Forest Service. Mm-hmm. I just personally cannot talk to. Everything I have against him or anything like that is all hearsay. So.
Yeah, right.
But we do find that interesting.
We do find it interesting.
I mean, it did seem interesting. But we didn't really get into your neighbors had dealt with this Lunders before also. Like you had referenced that crossed your mind of other people who had to deal with them. I guess, can you get in that a little bit, or what was your neighbor's perspective on him?
Well, there's been a couple neighbors that have dealt with him here. One is Frank Bloom, that he left our situation and went right straight to Frank. Frank's is kind of a little different. I mean, but still something that needs to be taken care of. Happens to be most of his was never surveyed. So there wasn't any reason to really know where the boundaries were there either. But still something that the Forest Service, the federal government needs to clear up and get rid of. So that, because of what had happened to us, escalated that situation dramatically.
Well, I would say that Lunders acted very similarly towards Frank as he did toward us. He was very aggressive, and he came in and said, I am doing this, and
no matter what you say.
Yep. And Frank purchased the property with everything the way he didn't change anything. So it was somewhat similar in the approach taken by the Forest Service and the landowner having inherited the situation. And Yep, we've heard lots of southwest of us, they have some wild horses that keep getting on Forest Service allotments, and that came to Travis Lunders also, and we were told that kind of went to court, but they just made them pay a fee for the whatever the horses ate. So there's a lot of inconsistencies, and when we're very aggressive towards people, and when we let use not included in the current grazing allotment agreement just fly, and it's no big deal. But yeah, we've got lots and lots of people that called us with willing to testify
Oh,
with issues they've had
with
with
him specifically.
yes, with him specifically.
Well,
Yeah.
and it's more the lenience when he wants it to be lenient, and overboard when it's
Hmm.
when it
Yeah.
goes the other direction.
Right.
There's probably just as many problems that we know of. Some are really close to us that really are issues
Right.
that aren't being dealt with, but he's wasting time dealing
Hmm.
with this, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Is he still working in the area then?
We have no
They
idea.
act like he just magically disappeared. He is hard to find in a Google search. The U.S. Forest Service is like, Travis who? And we're like, no. So that's one thing that we are, we don't. You do need to act in an appropriate manner as a government employee, and we felt like that did not occur here, and we would not like to see anybody else treated that way.
Right.
And so
Have,
we're encouraging that they do find where he is.
right. No
And
one else needs their lives destroyed for a year straight, right? Or
yep,
possibly their entire life destroyed.
for no
Um,
reason, with reconciliation methods in place. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, history has there's lots of his history out there,
Hmm.
and so we're not the first. That's the
Yeah.
scary part.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm sure you have thought for a year that question of why, right? Like,
Yeah.
do you have any theories or are you just kind of, you know, hands in the air at this point?
There's lots of theories.
Or any,
Um,
I mean, I came up with my own theory with the wildlife corridor. I still feel like I need to kind of correct that video because of things I've learned since.
I
But
don't think you're too far off.
right, I'm talking about
I think
placement
it's
almost
definitely something.
because
So
like your property that is in question, part of the map that I didn't see was Pennington County, and from looking at a map, as the crow flies, there's about 5, 6 miles between the two um, federal areas. Does that sound right or not?
oh yeah, north south probably. Yep.
Two landowners with being you and Kyle Edoff's dad,
Yep.
right,
Yep.
Scott. And so there's two landowners between two massive federal sections of land. And so yeah, the wildlife corridor, and then the other theory, I guess you can comment on it if you want to, but is I find it interesting because what would have happened if you would have went to trial? That's something. Had you thought much about that? I mean, you talked about you had an army of people supporting you. I thought about it, like, what do we do if this goes to trial? I mean, I've had people message me crazy things, send when I'm like, whoa, whoa, I have to calm people down. But just, I mean, my thought was, and when you look at the history of what went on this past 4 years, this word insurrection has been so politicized, and there's a group of people that love that word, right? That of over what happened. And it's everything in this issue. It was brought to me. I think Brett talked about. Look at um, who you are, like this young family, young kids. If anyone wants to get people angry, it take this young innocent family who's never done anything wrong and throwing them in prison for 10 years. If that would have happened, you know,
Well,
had you guys thought about that or what your
oh yeah,
trial
we
would
were
look like? And
Every day.
every day. I mean, everywhere you went, there was a person that says, "Do we need to form a militia?"
right,
And you're like, "Oh no, 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 back off!"
right,
Like let's do this a different way for right now. But don't forget about it though.
Right.
and it's, well, when you get people like, we need to work with the sheriff so we can close down the town so there's enough space for everyone to come to your trial.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that are starting to get going on when you get near your trial date, and you're like, this isn't just your neighbors anymore or your family. This was welcoming America to the
Right.
trial, you know.
And
Yeah.
I
And
go ahead.
I was just picturing like what we'd seen in Europe, the interstates filled with tractors, things like that kind of happening. I was,
It easily happened.
yeah, I
There was a lot of work on my part behind the scenes to prevent it from
hmm
going that way early on. And we reached out to quite a few, particularly state officials, and said, hey, these people are wanting to come and do this, and we're working really hard to not go that route, but you need to be aware
right.
of what people are willing to do on our behalf. And how crazy that you're the one with criminal charges against you, and you're also the one that's trying to continue to take the high road
Yeah.
through that. But oh, every day people were, and we're thankful for that. But we were very optimistic and hopeful that we could do what has occurred instead of having to, because at that point we all lose quite a bit of control of the situation and it spirals. And
Yeah. And credibility and every other thing. I
yep,
mean, you
yep,
can't control what crazy people might do and
that's
then it
right.
gets linked to you and
Yep.
yeah, so very thankful for everything. Um I guess going forward, um what's the plan? Are you going to, if it once your part gets settled, do you have you thought about kind of will you stay involved in this kind of stuff or how? I mean, you seem to be very involved both before before even this happened and as far as media wise, I guess you want to comment on that?
I guess personally, I see there's a lot of issues right here at home that need to be taken care of, whether it's these land trades, the state river channel issue that we've alluded to. That's just a gray area that we all deal with. And that's only going to get worse unless it's dealt with. Um, just try to set up these county commissioners, counties with they got some backbone, and this honestly could have been probably tamped down pretty severely by a good sheriff,
Mm-hmm.
Or
um, or a governor
Mm-hmm.
at the time, and so you don't have to get real carried away before you got yourself a pretty good job.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I don't think we're going to shy away from, whatever comes our way
Right.
at whatever level, whatever we're able to do. I mean, at our heart and soul, we like to farm and ranch,
Yeah.
but it also takes us all to stand up and fight these issues also.
Right.
When we
And
have
so,
some neighbors who got the same issue,
Yeah.
uh-huh.
and if we can help them get those taken care of, that might be to
That,
start with
Right. Yeah.
where we go.
And I feel like a magnifying glass has kind of been put on Custer County, and I feel like it needed to be.
Thank you.
What what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on, I guess, the neighborhood? And I mean, it's interesting. Like I know some of your neighbors. I didn't know they were your neighbors, but like Rick and Teresa Fox, I've been on the phone with them and talking about kind of what is going on there because it just seems like a takeover. I guess, do you have any thoughts on that? Like as I've alluded to, the Patagonia Land Nature Conservancy, they now own tens of thousands of acres in this county where there isn't a whole lot of acres that are up for private use. I guess if you had.
Well, so where this gets to be a real issue is when we start changing generations here.
Right.
I bet you could fit the families our age inside of a tour bus in
hmm
eastern Custer County. Um, we can't run it all, and nor will we be able to financially take it all on. But the thing is there's going to be some trading or some land up for sale because of the generational swap that's going to go on. And And that really worries me a little bit of how much more there of this land that's going to get easily pulled into this corridor or whatever that's going on right here. Um, and it might be coincidental, but um, yeah, we got to really be careful on how we handle some of these issues as young people, right? In, I'll just say, 100-mile radius right here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I've said from the beginning, I hate that it happened to you guys, but when you look back on it, and I mean, it goes into everything, the whole country, I guess. We're
Yep.
generations are changing, and we are in a it's going to be a big issue. And seeing what happened in Custer County, where if you haven't seen, 25,000 acre ranch was bought by the Nature Conservancy. The Nature Conservancy's been given hundreds of millions of dollars from the federal government. So it's kind of like, what is happening here? And how come these opportunities aren't given to small family farms and ranches?
I
Um,
would love to see a lot of attention drawn to these public
Paid public partnership.
partnerships like
yeah,
you guys have been talking, with this administration, and lay out how it's crippling agriculture.
right,
On the other hand, they're helping out what well they think they're helping out, but it's actually not, and or it's going in the wrong hands. And so I just admire you and taking that bull by the horns and drawing it out, too, and Chad and those guys. And the problem is you're only a couple men, and
right.
we need an army against that too.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, you guys, no one could maybe have helped the way you guys have. So, or brought attention to it and opened people's eyes the way you guys have. But um, I think that's about it. Unless you have anything else you want to.
We just want to say thank you to everyone, on all fronts and facets.
Associations that have
Yeah,
helped from the
Right.
beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, we are grateful for all that everyone has done. We are, because we were the face of this, but as Charles said, there was an army behind us of gifts and talents that all contributed.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah, and in the age, I've talked about it too. Like anybody who clicked that share button on any one of your stories, I mean, it just I think about like what would have happened, I talked about AJ's family at the beginning, the Bundys. Like social media wasn't around back then,
Right.
like it is now. If this would have happened even maybe 10 years ago, who knows how much word could have even gotten out there and spread to where it could have helped you. So, yeah, I mean,
And
I hate
another,
the internet and social media as much as anybody, but it's kind of like this is what it's for almost in the end.
well, and we've learned through this, farmers and ranchers, they try to keep their dealings with the government quiet
Hmm.
and always just dealt with them one on one, Well, I think those days should be behind us. We need to start educating everyone of how they deal with these things and where to go, who to ask questions to, um, what the court system looks like. I mean, if they do drag you into it, that was a rude awakening in itself. And just like the shortage of lawyers to help us, and
Right.
that word needs to just be spread everywhere. And how to, we have, I knew of one consultant that worked for the Forest Service or worked,
helped you with
yeah,
working.
helped, yep. And there's multiple people out there that do that sort of thing. So you need to, it kind of depends on where you're at in life and what you're, like for us dealing with the Forest Service, is people dealing with the BLM or maybe the EPA or the waters of the US, or, whatever you're faced with. Go find the people that can fight, because it's only a matter of time before it becomes an issue
Yeah.
that you're going to have to deal with.
Yeah, but I also like that point of make it public too. I mean,
Oh
tell
yeah,
people what
yeah.
you're dealing with, and even to the point of like transition plans, all that kind of stuff. We're getting into where everyone needs to kind of work together to keep
Yep.
keep things in the right hands. So that was a great point.
Well, and the old generation needs to realize that
Their actions still
they're
matter.
still they still matter, and what decisions they choose to do, who they sell to, and or let operate, or
Yeah.
it's a trickle down effect.
Yeah. It matters as much as, almost more than anybody's. And
Right,
Right.
right.
Yep.
it's not like how they grew up. Well, the neighbor will come in or some kid from town will come in. If it's not your family, it'll be some other neighbor kid. It ain't how it is anymore.
Well,
Um,
and top dollar now is the Nature Conservancy,
right.
and
Yeah.
they all have a choice to make. You can take top dollar, or you can support agriculture through the next generations.
Right.
Set up a
Exactly.
kid with it or something, or set up your neighbor instead of letting him buy it at public auction next to the Nature Conservancy. Just go right straight to him and sell it to him.
Yeah. Yep. And I mean, that's a nationwide deal. You talk about nature
Yes.
conserve. I'm in Iowa. They own some land, quite a bit of land just south of me here, but there's also, Bill Gates is a big land, or yeah,
Right.
Bill
Right.
Gates is a
Yeah.
big landowner now, and a lot of these, just people with a ton of money are throwing it into land. So,
Yep.
that's a big problem. But anyway, I feel like we've taken up a lot of your time. I really wanted to say thank you for everything, all the I wish, I guess I didn't ask how annoying Chad was through this whole deal, but I guess you kind of alluded to that. And I
Oh,
told him a lot of times I do these interviews just by myself, so that's always, and me and him just talk on the other one. But I said, you come on and be part of this one. He goes, no, you just do it. So he's loading cattle today anyway. So, but
we're
he,
grateful for you.
yeah.
Yeah.
We are. Yep.
Well, I thought
Well, and he flew up
I,
here from Texas to be part of that um, South Dakota congressional deal, that they put together. And I mean, that just says something to take his own time and money and effort to come and jump right in the middle of this so he could understand it better.
yeah, I think that's his life's work is really to these kind of issues. So,
Yep.
yeah, yeah, I
We're
appreciate
probably
him
not
too.
too far behind him, honestly. It might
Yeah,
be our life
that's what he
for a year
told
or
me.
four
He
or
said,
two.
because, he went through kind of a similar thing of losing property and he said they're never going to be the same after this. They're
Yep.
going to be fighters, which I'm
Yep.
sure you seemed like you already are, but, thanks a lot for coming on. Thanks for From the Farm. Go to fromthefarm.org. Everybody that has supported Lonesome Lands and what I'm doing, go to lonesomelands.com, click subscribe, and we're able to keep doing this kind of stuff. But thank you guys, and get back to work and enjoy your lives, I guess. I'm
Yeah.
sure we'll
Well,
see you
thank
down the
you.
road.
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.